don't you? Millions of people bought houses they couldn't afford, and now they're living on the streets. 85% of the world's wealth is controlled by 1% of the population. What do you think is going to happen when those people wake up and realise you've got all their money? Oh, you think they're going to ask questions when they come with their pitchforks and their torches? You live in a mansion. You drive a $90,000 car. Look at me. Look at me. This is a $200 suit. I wear a second-hand tie, I fly coach. Not because I can't afford first, because I'm smart. So look at you and look at me and tell me who's the richer. There's an accounting coming, Mr. Stussy. And you know I'm right. Mongol hordes descending. And what are you doing to insulate yourself and your family? You think you're rich? You've no idea what rich means. Rich is a fleet of private planes filled with decoys to mask your scent. It's a bunker in Wyoming and another in Gestad. So that's action item 1, the accumulation of wealth. And I mean wealth, not money. What's action item number 2? To use that wealth to become invisible.
And that there is exactly how the story goes. We all know what Trump looks like. We all know what Musk looks like. And some of the other players on the world stage, many of the other players on the world stage, and they're the puppets. And then, of course, we have the puppet master. And I think the puppet master likes loud, noisy people who cause a ruckus, who bring attention upon themselves, screaming and shouting about the injustices of the world, but doing very little to change anything about it. And you could point your finger at Trump if he's walking down the street, or Elon Musk, because you know what they look like. But really, I mean, if we're at the point where we realise that we shouldn't be looking outside ourselves for a saviour, and that a saviour comes from within, then why are we still trying to look outside of ourselves for somebody to blame? It's all about contracts, offers and agreements, and we don't have to agree to any of it if we don't want to. We are immersed within a copy and paste reality, and the architect of this world cleverly uses fictitious stories to convert spiritual beings into a dungeon of attachments, that of which are purely materialistic and are always going to be the permanent property of this realm, and we can't take any of it with us when we leave here. It believes itself to be worthy of unlimited power, and it demands to be worshipped and claims to be all-knowing. It claims to be a god. It creates multiple counterfeit copies of heroic personalities that masquerade as heroes throughout the ages. But its true nature is that of a ruthless tyrant and of a jealous, vengeful and formidable adversary of the immortal being. And there are plenty of people who've adopted these characteristics, some maybe through trauma and others because it benefits them, while others are simply just a product of programming. And by that, I mean that some of the characters on the world stage, in my opinion, could be permanent fixtures of the construct. There are so many famous people who seem to identically resemble people from the past, from hundreds of years ago. And there are even people, just everyday people, who have found images online or in art galleries around the world that seem to be their own personal doppelganger. And although these meat suits may be limited, personalities are unique. And during the closing ceremony at the Paris Olympics, we were introduced to a character known as the Golden Voyager. This was explained off as the Golden Voyager, which was inspired by the legendary golden disc sent into space by NASA in 1977. A lot of people were saying it looked like it was depicting Lucifer or a mantis, But what I saw, my interpretation was of a bee. To me, it resembled a bee. And who was known as the bee man? Zeus. Zeus was sometimes called bee man or honey man. And Zeus, being the king of all the gods in Greek mythology, is famously wicked. He lies and cheats, especially when it comes to tricking women into infidelity. And Zeus consistently doles out harsh punishments to those who act against his will, regardless of their merit. And the bee was also the symbol of Artemis, the daughter of Zeus and twin sister of Apollo, who was the goddess of the hunt, wild animals, and chastity. And a powerful cult of Artemis existed in Ephesus, and the bee motif appeared on Ephesian coins for centuries, and girls who served in the temple were referred to as bees. The high priestess at the shrine of Delphi was also commonly known as the Delphic bee. And the Oracle of Delphi was one of the strongest and most lasting institutions of the ancient Greek world. The ancient Greek temple stood as an active oracular center and pilgrimage site for over 1,000 years. The Delphic oracle was called both Pythia and Bee, connecting her to two ancient symbols of feminine power, the snake, the python, and the bee. Also accounted for in Mycenaean Greek and Minoan myth, the bee was an emblem of Potnia, referred to as the pure mother bee, and her priestesses received the name Melissa, or bee. According to the Neoplatonic philosopher Porphyry, the priestesses of Demeter were also called Melissae, and Melissa was also a name of Artemis. And Persephone, as the queen of the underworld, was able to cross from the land of the living to the land of the dead and back again, linking her, like the bee, with the cycles of nature and the birth and death cycle. And much like the phoenix, the bee also represents the cycle of death and rebirth. And as bees are often known to be dwellers of rock clefts, caves, and tree hollows, bees are easily associated with the underworld, passing through narrow crevices that symbolize gateways, and the Melissae act as mediaries or messengers between the realms, able to share the wisdom of the earth with mortals. And bees were also once called birds of the muses, another reference to bees as messengers, as birds were associated with omens and the delivery of divine knowledge, and they are often a source of divine inspiration, prophecy, and song. And for this reason, the Melissae also came to be associated with the Olympic gods of prophecy, Hermes and Apollo. In the Homeric hymns, we understand that Apollo says that he was actually taught the art of prophecy by three Melissae dwelling in the caves of Mount Parnassus near Delphi. Apollo's takeover of the Delphic oracle marked a succession of intrusions of worldly powers on the sanctuary. Male priests came in and took control of the Delphic shrine. So it comes as no surprise to me that French pianist and opera singer Benjamin Bernheim delivered a rendition of the hymn to Apollo during the closing ceremony at the Olympics. My interpretation is that it's a celebration of the continuing powers of the priesthood and the patriarchal control over institutions, intelligence agencies, and operations that are continuing worldwide today. And the producers described the ceremony as a dreamlike immersive journey through time. That's pretty much what we're experiencing in our lives, is a dreamlike immersive journey through time. And the band Phoenix that played at the closing ceremony was said to have been supposed to play at the opening ceremony, but were interrupted by some insects. And those insects happened to be bees that were being kept at the most famous art museum, which then the plans had changed and they ended up playing during the closing ceremony. In Freemasonry, the bee is a widely recognised symbol that carries significant meaning and importance. The bee is associated with several key Masonic principles and values. Number one, industriousness and productivity. The hard-working nature of bees is seen as emblematic of the diligence, industry, and productivity that Freemasons strive to embody in their personal and fraternal lives. The bees' tireless efforts to gather nectar and construct the hive are viewed as a model of how Masons should approach their craft. Number 2, communal cooperation. Bees are highly social insects that work together in a structured hierarchical hive. This collaborative spirit is reflective of the Masonic emphasis on unity, mutual support, and the collective efforts of the brethren to achieve shared goals. Number 3, regeneration and rebirth. The bee's life cycle, which involves metamorphosis from larvae to adult, is sometimes interpreted as a symbol of spiritual transformation, death, and rebirth, concepts that are central to Masonic initiatory rituals and philosophical teachings. Number 4, divine inspiration and wisdom. In some Masonic traditions, the bee is associated with divine inspiration, wisdom, and the pursuit of higher knowledge. The bee's ability to navigate and thrive in the natural world is seen as a metaphor for the Mason's journey towards enlightenment. And number 5 is fertility and abundance. As pollinators, bees are linked to ideas of fertility, abundance, and prosperity, qualities that Freemasons aspire to cultivate both materially and spiritually within their lodges and communities. The bee's multifaceted symbolism resonates deeply within the Masonic tradition, serving as a visual and conceptual representation of the virtues, principles, and aspirations that guide the craft and its members. An early 18th century ritual says of the symbol, the beehive teaches us that as we are born into the world rational and intelligent beings, so ought we also be industrious ones, and not stand idly by or gaze with listless indifference on even the meanest of our fellow creatures in a state of distress, if it is in our power to help them without detriment to ourselves or our connections. The constant practice of this virtue is enjoyed on all created beings, from the highest seraph in heaven to the meanest reptile that crawls in the dust. Now, the idea of being a part of a collective hive mind doesn't sound very fetching to me, but just remember that, there's many hives, so you just got to pick your hive and find where you fit in best. And during the scene in the closing ceremony with the map of the 6 continents, the inhabited continents, there's a platform that goes across from North America through Africa and over to Australia. And look, it looks to me like a platform for the attendees to be able to move around on the surface of this map that's elevated. But I did find one item of interest. It was in relation to a lunar eclipse that will take place on May 26 in 2040 and will be completely visible over Australia and the Pacific and seen rising over Eastern Asia and setting over North and South America. And while I was looking up that information, I found this ridiculous article which goes on to explain that the most significant part of the Artemis program is the Lunar Homestead Project, which aims to develop habitable structures to facilitate prolonged human presence and scientific endeavours on the moon. So, are the plans to go to the moon in 2040 or underground? Because I can't think of anything much further away from the underground as the surface of the moon. So yeah, it's interesting how they're having us pay attention to the moon and what's up there rather than what's possibly below our feet, as per usual. And I really enjoyed looking into the history and mythology and all of the symbolism of bees throughout antiquity. And I don't know, what do you think about this bee man that was floating around the arena during the closing ceremony? Is it a symbolic representation of Zeus, or is it some kind of communication in relation to prophecy and oracles? I'd be interested to know what other people think. Anyhow, that's it for me. I'm going to end it here. I hope you're all having a good one, and I do hope to catch you on the next one.